Welcome to another video on stories of our history. The story of how the Persian language survived the Arab conquest and went on to become one of the great literary languages of world history is a testament to the resilience of cultural identity in the face of overwhelming political and religious change. When Arab armies emerged from the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century and brought down the Sasanian Empire, they carried with them not only a new religion but also a new language that would become the primary medium of Islamic civilization. The Arabic language, as the language of the Quran and of the emerging Islamic State, possessed enormous prestige and authority, and it seemed entirely possible that the conquered peoples of the former Sasanian Empire would gradually abandon their native tongues in favor of the language of their new rulers. This pattern had occurred many times in history, as conquered peoples adopted the languages of their conquerors and eventually lost their own linguistic heritage altogether. Yet the Persians did not follow this pattern. Instead, they maintained their language through centuries of Arabic dominance, transforming it from the Middle Persian of the Sasanian period, written in the difficult Pahlavi script, into the New Persian of the Islamic period, written in a modified version of the Arabic alphabet and enriched by thousands of Arabic loanwords. This transformation was not a simple matter of resistance or refusal to change, but rather a complex process of adaptation, negotiation, and creative synthesis that allowed Persian to survive and eventually flourish within the Islamic world. The language that was spoken in the Sasanian Empire was Middle Persian, also known as Pahlavi, which had developed from Old Persian, the language of the Achaemenid Empire that had been spoken and written centuries earlier. Middle Persian was the language of the Sasanian court, the Zoroastrian priesthood, and the imperial administration, and it was written in a script that was derived from Aramaic and was notoriously difficult to read due to its many ambiguous characters and its use of Aramaic words that were read as Persian equivalents. The Pahlavi script was intimately associated with the Zoroastrian religious tradition, and its complexity served to restrict literacy to a relatively small class of priests and scribes who had undergone extensive training. After the Arab conquest, the use of Pahlavi declined rapidly in administrative contexts, as the new Islamic State conducted its business in Arabic and employed Arabic as the language of official records and correspondence. However, Pahlavi did not disappear entirely, as Zoroastrian priests continued to use it for religious texts, and some Persian communities maintained the ability to read and write in the old script for several centuries. The decline of Pahlavi was gradual rather than sudden, reflecting the broader pattern of cultural transition that characterized the early Islamic period in Iran. The spoken language of the Persian people was a different matter entirely from the written language of the Sasanian administration. While the elite scribes and priests used Pahlavi for written documents, the vast majority of the population spoke various Iranian dialects and vernaculars that had evolved naturally over centuries of daily use. These spoken varieties of Persian were not immediately affected by the Arab conquest, as the average Persian peasant, artisan, or merchant had little need to learn Arabic in the early decades of Islamic rule. Arabic was the language of the new rulers and of the Islamic religion, but it was not yet the language of everyday life for most Persians. The spoken Persian language continued to evolve in the centuries after the conquest, gradually developing from Middle Persian into what scholars call New Persian, the form of the language that would eventually become the literary medium of Islamic Iran. This development occurred naturally, as languages do, through the gradual accumulation of changes in pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar that characterize all living languages. The spoken Persian of the 8th and 9th centuries was different from the Middle Persian of the Sasanian period, but it was still recognizably the same language, preserving its essential grammatical structure and core vocabulary while incorporating new elements from the changed cultural environment. The early Islamic period in Iran was characterized by a linguistic division of labor, in which Arabic served as the language of religion, administration, and high culture, while Persian remained the language of daily life for the vast majority of the population. This bilingual situation created a complex linguistic landscape in which individuals navigated between languages depending on the context of communication. A Persian merchant might use Arabic when dealing with government officials or conducting business with Arab traders, but would use Persian at home and in the marketplace among fellow Persians. A Persian convert to Islam would learn Arabic to read the Quran and participate in religious rituals, but might still think and speak in Persian in daily life. This bilingualism was not unique to Iran, as similar situations existed throughout the Islamic world where Arabic coexisted with local languages. However, the situation in Iran was distinctive because of the strength of Persian cultural identity and the eventual emergence of Persian as a literary language in its own right, a development that would distinguish Iran from many other regions of the Islamic world where Arabic remained the sole language of high culture. The transformation of Persian from a purely spoken language into a literary language written in Arabic script was a gradual process that took place over several centuries. The first steps in this transformation occurred in the eastern regions of the Islamic world, particularly in Khorasan and Transoxiana, where Persian-speaking populations lived at some distance from the centers of Arabic culture, and where the process of linguistic interaction between Persian and Arabic took distinctive forms. The Persian spoken in these eastern regions had already begun to diverge from the Middle Persian of the Sasanian period, incorporating elements from other Iranian languages such as Sogdian and Bactrian that were spoken in the region, as well as Arabic loanwords that entered the language through contact with the Islamic State. By the 9th century, this eastern variety of New Persian had developed sufficiently to serve as a literary medium, and it was in this region that the first works of New Persian literature were composed. The emergence of New Persian as a literary language marked a crucial turning point in the history of the language, as it demonstrated that Persian could adapt to the new cultural environment of the Islamic world while maintaining its distinctive identity. The resilience of the Persian language in the face of Arabic dominance was made possible by a combination of factors, including the demographic weight of the Persian-speaking population, the practical necessity of communicating with the masses in their own language, and the cultural pride that Persians took in their linguistic heritage. The Arab conquerors were a small minority in Iran, vastly outnumbered by the Persian population, and they could not govern effectively without communicating with their subjects in some form of Persian. Even as Arabic became the language of official records and religious texts, Persian remained the language of the marketplace, the home, and the community, where the vast majority of social interaction took place. The Persian language was also deeply intertwined with Iranian cultural identity, carrying within it the memory of the pre-Islamic past and the values and traditions that had shaped Iranian civilization for centuries. This cultural dimension of language made Persian a powerful symbol of Iranian identity, one that could not simply be abandoned in favor of Arabic without losing something essential about what it meant to be Persian. The survival of Persian was thus not merely a matter of practical necessity but also a matter of cultural identity and pride, as Persians maintained their language as a way of maintaining their connection to their history and their sense of who they were. The fall of the Pahlavi script represents one of the most significant transformations in the history of the Persian language, as the ancient writing system associated with the Sasanian Empire and the Zoroastrian religion gradually gave way to a new script based on the Arabic alphabet. Pahlavi had been the primary written form of Persian during the Sasanian period, used for imperial inscriptions, administrative documents, religious texts, and literary works. The script was derived from Aramaic, which had served as the administrative language of the Achaemenid Empire and had left a lasting imprint on the writing systems of the Iranian world. Pahlavi was characterized by a number of features that made it difficult to read, including the use of Aramaic words that were read as Persian equivalents, a limited number of characters that represented multiple sounds, and the omission of many vowel sounds. These features meant that reading Pahlavi required extensive training and practice, and literacy was largely restricted to the priestly class and the administrative elite who had the time and resources to master this complex system. The difficulty of Pahlavi was not necessarily a problem during the Sasanian period, when the state supported the training of scribes and priests, and when the script served as a marker of elite status and specialized knowledge. The Arab conquest brought about a fundamental change in the status of Pahlavi, as the new Islamic state conducted its administration in Arabic and had no need for the old Persian writing system. The Sasanian administrative apparatus, which had employed thousands of scribes trained in Pahlavi, was gradually dismantled or transformed, as Arab governors and their Persian assistants adopted Arabic for official purposes. The decline of Pahlavi was not immediate, as many Persian scribes continued to use the old script for private records and some local administration in the early decades after the conquest. Zoroastrian priests, in particular, maintained the use of Pahlavi for religious texts, copying and preserving the sacred literature of their faith even as the political and social environment became increasingly Islamic. However, the overall trend was clear. Pahlavi was losing ground to Arabic as the primary written language of the Iranian world, and the old script was becoming increasingly marginal in the new Islamic order. This decline of Pahlavi created a significant challenge for the Persian language, as it threatened to leave Persian without a written form at all, reducing it to a purely spoken language with no literary presence. The spoken Persian language, however, did not depend on the Pahlavi script for its survival. The vast majority of the Persian population was illiterate, and their language lived and evolved through speech rather than through writing. The spoken Persian of the post-conquest period continued to develop naturally, incorporating new vocabulary from Arabic and other languages while maintaining its essential Iranian grammatical structure. This spoken language was the foundation upon which New Persian would eventually be built, and its vitality ensured that Persian would survive even as the old written form declined. The relationship between spoken and written language in the early Islamic period was complex, as the spoken Persian of the 8th and 9th centuries had already diverged significantly from the Middle Persian that was preserved in Pahlavi texts. This divergence meant that even if the Pahlavi script had been maintained, it would have been increasingly inadequate for representing the spoken language of the people. The development of New Persian as a written language required not only a new script but also a new set of conventions for representing the spoken language in written form, a process that would take several centuries to complete. The adoption of the Arabic alphabet for writing Persian was not a simple or inevitable development, but rather the result of specific historical circumstances and practical considerations. The Arabic alphabet had the advantage of being widely known among the literate classes of the Islamic world, as it was the script of the Quran and of the administrative documents that circulated throughout the Caliphate. Persian scribes who had learned Arabic for official purposes could easily apply the same script to their own language, adapting it as necessary to represent sounds that did not exist in Arabic. This practical advantage made the Arabic alphabet the natural choice for writing Persian in the Islamic period, despite the existence of alternative scripts that might have been adapted for the purpose. The adoption of the Arabic alphabet also had symbolic significance, as it associated the Persian language with the prestige and authority of the Islamic State and the Islamic religion. Persian, written in Arabic script, could claim a place within the Islamic world rather than standing outside it, and this association with Islam would prove crucial to the language's survival and eventual flourishing. The process of adapting the Arabic alphabet for Persian required the addition of new letters to represent sounds that were characteristic of Persian but did not exist in Arabic. The Arabic alphabet originally had 28 letters, but Persian required 4 additional letters to represent the sounds P, CH, CH, and G, which were common in Persian but absent from Arabic. These new letters were created by modifying existing Arabic letters, adding dots or other diacritical marks to distinguish them from their Arabic counterparts. The result was a Persian alphabet of 32 letters, based on the Arabic script but adapted to the phonological needs of the Persian language. This adaptation demonstrated the creativity and flexibility of Persian scribes, who were able to take a foreign writing system and make it their own, using it to represent their language accurately and effectively. The addition of these 4 letters also served as a marker of Persian identity, distinguishing Persian from Arabic even as the two languages shared the same basic script. This visual distinction, though subtle, was significant in maintaining the separate identity of Persian as a language in its own right. The adoption of the Arabic alphabet for Persian had profound consequences for the future development of the language, as it connected Persian to the broader Islamic cultural world while also preserving its distinctiveness. The Arabic script made Persian accessible to anyone who had learned to read Arabic, which was essential for the spread of Persian literature throughout the Islamic world. At the same time, the modified Persian alphabet, with its additional letters, ensured that Persian could be written accurately and that the distinctive sounds of the language would not be lost in the transition to the new script. The adoption of the Arabic alphabet also opened Persian to the influence of Arabic vocabulary, as Persian writers naturally incorporated Arabic words into their texts when writing in a script that was primarily associated with Arabic. This vocabulary enrichment would prove to be one of the most significant consequences of the script change, as Persian absorbed thousands of Arabic words in the fields of religion, law, philosophy, science, and literature, greatly expanding the expressive capacity of the language. The transformation of Persian from Pahlavi to New Persian, written in Arabic script, was thus a crucial turning point in the history of the language, marking its entry into the Islamic cultural world while preserving its essential Iranian identity. The survival of spoken Persian through the centuries of Arab rule represents one of the most remarkable examples of linguistic resilience in world history, as the language of everyday life continued to evolve and thrive even as the language of power and religion shifted decisively to Arabic. The vast majority of the population in the former Sasanian Empire spoke Iranian languages, and these speakers did not simply abandon their native tongues upon the arrival of Arab conquerors. Instead, they continued to use Persian and other Iranian languages in their homes, their communities, and their daily interactions, maintaining the linguistic traditions that had developed over centuries of continuous use. The spoken Persian of the post-conquest period was not identical to the Middle Persian of the Sasanian court, as languages naturally change over time and the social disruptions of conquest and conversion accelerated certain linguistic developments. However, the essential continuity of the language was maintained, as the grammatical structure, core vocabulary, and phonological patterns that distinguished Persian from Arabic remained intact. This continuity of spoken Persian provided the foundation upon which the literary language of New Persian would eventually be built. The evolution of spoken Persian in the centuries after the Arab conquest was shaped by a complex interplay of factors, including the natural processes of linguistic change, the influence of contact with Arabic and other languages, and the social and political transformations that accompanied the Islamization of Iran. The spoken Persian of the 8th and 9th centuries had already begun to simplify certain features of Middle Persian grammar, such as the complex case system that had characterized the older language. This grammatical simplification was part of a broader trend that had been underway for centuries, and was not directly caused by the Arab conquest, though the social disruptions of the period may have accelerated the process. At the same time, the vocabulary of spoken Persian was being enriched by the incorporation of Arabic loanwords, which entered the language through contact with the Islamic State and through the conversion of Persians to Islam. These Arabic words initially entered the language in the domains of religion, administration, and commerce, but gradually spread to other areas of vocabulary as well. The result was a spoken language that was recognizably Persian in its grammar and core vocabulary, but increasingly influenced by Arabic in its lexicon. The geographic distribution of Persian speakers in the post-conquest period played an important role in determining the future development of the language, as different regions of the former Sasanian Empire experienced different linguistic trajectories. The western regions of Iran, which were closer to the centers of Arab power and experienced more intensive Arab settlement, saw greater Arabic influence on the local Persian dialects, and, in some cases, the eventual replacement of Persian by Arabic in certain urban centers. The eastern regions of Iran, particularly Khorasan and Transoxiana, were more distant from the centers of Arab power and maintained stronger Persian linguistic traditions, even as they also experienced significant Arabic influence through the presence of Arab garrisons and the spread of Islam. The mountains and remote valleys of the Iranian plateau also served as refuges for Persian speakers, as these areas were less affected by Arab settlement and maintained their linguistic traditions with less interference. This regional variation in the linguistic landscape of post-conquest Iran would have important consequences for the later development of New Persian, as the eastern regions emerged as the primary centers of Persian literary revival. The role of the Daikans, the local Persian aristocracy who served as intermediaries between the Arab rulers and the Persian population, was crucial in maintaining the linguistic and cultural traditions of the Iranian world. These local elites, who had been the backbone of Sasanian provincial administration, often reached accommodations with Arab rulers that allowed them to maintain their lands and status in exchange for cooperation in tax collection and local governance. The Daikins served as cultural brokers between the Arab ruling class and the Persian population, explaining Arab policies to Persian communities and conveying Persian expectations to Arab governors. They also served as patrons of Persian culture, supporting the preservation of Persian traditions and the development of new forms of cultural expression. The Daikins were often bilingual, fluent in both Persian and Arabic, and their ability to navigate between the two linguistic worlds was essential to the smooth functioning of the early Islamic state. The continued existence of this Persian elite class ensured that Persian language and culture maintained a presence within the new Islamic order, even as the political dominance shifted to Arab rulers. The conversion of Persians to Islam did not necessarily mean the abandonment of the Persian language, as many converts maintained their native language while embracing the new religion. Islam as a religion emphasized the importance of understanding the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, which required knowledge of Arabic. However, this religious requirement did not extend to the abandonment of one's native language, and many Persian Muslims continued to speak Persian in their daily lives while using Arabic for religious purposes. The bilingualism that characterized many Persian converts allowed them to participate fully in the religious life of the Islamic community, while maintaining their linguistic and cultural identity as Persians. This bilingualism was particularly important in the development of Persian Islamic culture, as it created a class of individuals who could mediate between the Arabic language of religion and scholarship and the Persian language of daily life and cultural expression. The existence of this bilingual class of Persian Muslims laid the foundation for the later development of new Persian literature, which would combine Arabic vocabulary and Islamic themes with the Persian language and Iranian cultural traditions. The daily linguistic practices of ordinary Persians in the post-conquest period are difficult to reconstruct in detail due to the scarcity of written sources that document spoken language. However, it is clear from the available evidence that Persian remained the primary language of communication for the vast majority of the population throughout the early Islamic period. The Arab conquerors and settlers, who were concentrated in garrison cities and administrative centers, were a small minority in most regions of Iran, and their linguistic influence on the rural population was limited. In the cities, the situation was more complex, as Arab settlers and Persian converts interacted in markets, mosques, and administrative offices, creating environments of intensive language contact. In these urban settings, Persian and Arabic coexisted and influenced each other, with bilingual individuals switching between languages depending on the social context. This urban bilingualism was particularly important in the development of New Persian, as it was in the cities that the new literary language took shape, drawing on both Persian and Arabic resources to create a medium of expression that could serve the needs of the emerging Islamic Iranian society. The region of Khorasan played a pivotal role in the formation and development of New Persian, serving as a linguistic laboratory where the spoken Persian of the post-conquest period was transformed into a literary language capable of expressing the full range of Islamic culture and Iranian identity. Khorasan, which means the land of the rising sun in Persian, encompassed a vast territory in the northeastern part of the former Sasanian Empire, including parts of present-day Iran, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. This region was characterized by extraordinary linguistic and cultural diversity, as it was home to Persian speakers, Sogdian speakers, Bactrian speakers, Turkish speakers, and Arab settlers, all of whom interacted in a complex web of commercial, political, and cultural relationships. This diversity created an environment of intense linguistic contact and exchange, in which the Persian spoken in Khorasan absorbed elements from other languages while also serving as a lingua franca for communication across ethnic and linguistic boundaries. The cosmopolitan character of Khorasan made it an ideal environment for the development of a new literary language that could serve the needs of a diverse and dynamic society. The distance of Khorasan from the centers of Arab power in the West had important consequences for the development of Persian in the region. Unlike the western provinces of Iran, which were more directly under the control of the Caliphate and experienced more intensive Arab settlement, Khorasan maintained a greater degree of cultural autonomy and Persian linguistic vitality. The Arab settlers in Khorasan were concentrated in garrison cities such as Merv, Nishapur, and Balkh, while the surrounding countryside remained predominantly Persian-speaking. This geographic separation between Arab urban centers and Persian rural areas created conditions in which the Persian language could continue to evolve with relatively less Arabic influence than in the western regions of Iran. At the same time, the presence of Arab garrisons and the spread of Islam in Khorasan ensured that Arabic vocabulary and Islamic concepts entered the Persian language through the urban centers and gradually spread to the surrounding countryside. This pattern of linguistic contact and diffusion created a form of Persian that was both deeply rooted in Iranian tradition and thoroughly engaged with Islamic culture. The role of Khorasan in the Abbasid Revolution of 750 further enhanced the importance of the region in the development of Persian language and culture. The Abbasid movement, which drew substantial support from Persian converts and from the eastern provinces in general, was based in Khorasan and drew its military strength from the region. The success of the Abbasid Revolution brought Khorasan to the center of Islamic politics, as the new dynasty established its capital at Baghdad in the heart of the former Sasanian territory, and surrounded itself with advisors and administrators from the eastern provinces. This political transformation elevated the status of Persians within the Islamic world and created new opportunities for the expression of Persian cultural identity. The Persian administrators and scholars who flocked to Baghdad brought with them the linguistic and cultural traditions of their homeland, contributing to the development of a distinctly Persianate form of Islamic culture. The connection between Khorasan and the Abbasid court ensured that the Persian language and cultural traditions of the eastern provinces would have a significant influence on the development of Islamic civilization as a whole. The emergence of New Persian as a literary language was closely tied to the political and cultural developments in Khorasan during the 9th and 10th centuries. The Tahirid dynasty, which established an autonomous Persian state in Khorasan in 821, was the first of several Persian dynasties that would patronize Persian literature and promote the use of Persian as a language of administration and culture. The Safarid dynasty, which succeeded the Tahirids in 861, was even more assertive in its promotion of Persian identity, and its founder, Yaqub ibn al-Layth, is said to have insisted that Persian poetry be recited at his court. The Samanid dynasty, which ruled Khorasan and Transoxiana from 819 to 999, represented the fullest expression of Persian cultural revival, as the Samanid rulers actively patronized Persian literature, promoted Persian administration, and celebrated their Iranian heritage. The Samanid capital at Bokhara became a major center of Persian culture, attracting poets, scholars, and artists from throughout the Eastern Islamic world. It was under Samanid patronage that New Persian literature achieved its first great flowering, with poets such as Radaki composing the first major works of Persian poetry. The term Dari, which is often associated with the literary Persian of the Samanid period, has its roots in the linguistic history of the Eastern Iranian world. The term appears in early Islamic sources as a name for the Persian language used at the Sasanian court, and it is often interpreted as being related to the word dar, meaning court or gate. According to this interpretation, Dari was the language of the court, the refined Persian spoken by the Sasanian elite and preserved in the eastern provinces after the fall of the empire. The use of the term Dari for the literary Persian of the Samanid period suggests a conscious connection between the new literary language and the prestige of the Sasanian court, even as the language itself had evolved significantly from the Middle Persian of the Sasanian era. The term Dari continues to be used today for the variety of Persian spoken in Afghanistan, maintaining a connection to the linguistic traditions of the Eastern Iranian world. The history of the term Dari illustrates the complex relationship between language, identity, and political authority in the Persian-speaking world. The development of New Persian in Khorasan was not an isolated phenomenon but rather part of a broader cultural transformation that affected the entire Eastern Islamic world. The cities of Khorasan and Transoxiana, including Merv, Nishapur, Balkh, Bokhara, and Samarkand, became centers of Islamic learning and Persian culture, attracting scholars, poets, and artists from throughout the Islamic world. These cities were cosmopolitan centers where Persian, Arabic, Turkish, and other languages coexisted and interacted, creating a rich cultural environment that fostered creativity and innovation. The Persian language that emerged from this environment was a flexible and expressive medium, capable of serving the needs of poetry, prose, administration, and scholarship. The literary Persian of the Samanid period established standards of language and style that would be followed by subsequent generations of Persian writers, creating a literary tradition that would extend across centuries and across vast geographic distances. The achievements of Khorasan in the development of New Persian demonstrate the creative potential of cultural contact and exchange, as the interaction of Persian and Islamic traditions produced something genuinely new and enduring. The adaptation of the Arabic alphabet for writing Persian represents one of the most ingenious and consequential developments in the history of the language, as Persian scribes transformed a foreign writing system into a vehicle for expressing their own language and preserving their cultural identity. The Arabic alphabet, which had been developed in the Arabian Peninsula and refined in the early Islamic period, was designed primarily for the Arabic language, with its characteristic phonological system that includes sounds produced in the back of the throat and excludes certain sounds that are common in other languages. The Arabic alphabet originally consisted of 28 letters, each representing a consonant sound, with vowel sounds indicated by diacritical marks that were often omitted in ordinary writing. This system worked well for Arabic, but it presented challenges for writing Persian, which had sounds that did not exist in Arabic and lacked some of the sounds that were distinctive of Arabic. The adaptation of the Arabic alphabet for Persian required modifications that would allow the script to represent Persian sounds accurately while maintaining its essential character and connection to the broader Islamic world. The 4 additional letters that were added to the Arabic alphabet for writing Persian represent sounds that are characteristic of the Persian language, but absent from Arabic. The letter P, representing the sound P, was created by adding 3 dots below the Arabic letter B, which represents the sound B. This modification created a visual connection between the two related sounds while clearly distinguishing the Persian letter from its Arabic counterpart. The letter Ch, representing the sound Ch, was created by adding 3 dots below the Arabic letter Jim, which represents the sound J. The letter J, representing the sound Zh, was created by adding 3 dots above the Arabic letter Re, which represents the sound R. The letter Gaf, representing the sound G, was created by adding a line above the Arabic letter Kaf, which represents the sound K. These modifications were simple but effective, allowing Persian to be written accurately in a script that was based on Arabic while maintaining the distinctive sounds that characterize the language. The addition of these 4 letters to the Arabic alphabet created a distinctly Persian version of the script that would be used for centuries to write Persian literature, history, and administration. The adoption of the Arabic alphabet for Persian had profound implications for the relationship between the Persian and Arabic languages, as it created a visual similarity between the two languages that facilitated the exchange of vocabulary and literary forms. When Persian was written in Arabic script, Persian writers could easily incorporate Arabic words and phrases into their texts, as the same script was used for both languages and the transition between Persian and Arabic text was seamless. This ease of incorporation contributed to the massive influx of Arabic vocabulary into Persian, as writers drew on the rich lexical resources of Arabic to express concepts related to religion, law, philosophy, science, and literature. The adoption of the Arabic alphabet also meant that Persian texts could be read by anyone who was literate in Arabic, which was essential for the spread of Persian literature throughout the Islamic world. A scholar in Baghdad or Cairo who had learned to read Arabic could also read Persian texts written in the same script, even if they did not understand the language perfectly. This accessibility of Persian literature to Arabic readers contributed to the prestige and influence of Persian literature throughout the Islamic world. The relationship between the Arabic and Persian languages in the Islamic period was characterized by a complex interplay of competition and cooperation, as each language served different functions and audiences while also influencing each other in significant ways. Arabic remained the primary language of religion throughout the Islamic world, as the Quran was revealed in Arabic and the rituals of Islamic worship were conducted in Arabic. Arabic also remained the primary language of scholarship in fields such as Islamic law, theology, and Quranic interpretation, as these disciplines were intimately tied to the Arabic language of the sacred texts. Persian, on the other hand, became the primary language of poetry, court culture, and literary expression in the Eastern Islamic world, as Persian poets developed a rich tradition of poetic expression that was admired and imitated throughout the Islamic world. Persian also became an important language of administration and historical writing, as Persian dynasties and their Turkish and Mongol successors used Persian for official documents and historical chronicles. This division of linguistic labor between Arabic and Persian was not rigid, as many scholars and writers were fluent in both languages and produced works in both Arabic and Persian, but it did create a distinctive linguistic landscape in which each language had its own domains of authority and prestige. The influence of Arabic on Persian vocabulary was extensive and enduring, as thousands of Arabic words entered the Persian language in the centuries after the Arab conquest. These loanwords covered a wide range of semantic fields, including religion, law, administration, philosophy, science, medicine, education, literature, and abstract concepts. Words such as kitab, book, ilm, knowledge, din, religion, adl, justice, and hakm, judgment, became deeply embedded in the Persian lexicon, so much so that many Persian speakers today may not be aware of their Arabic origins. The proportion of Arabic vocabulary in Persian texts varied depending on the genre and the author, with religious and philosophical texts often containing a very high proportion of Arabic words, while poetry and folk literature tended to use more native Persian vocabulary. Some medieval Persian texts, particularly in fields such as philosophy and theology, consisted largely of Arabic vocabulary arranged according to Persian grammar, creating a hybrid language that was neither purely Persian nor purely Arabic. This extensive Arabic influence on Persian vocabulary demonstrated the deep integration of Persian into the Islamic cultural world, while the persistence of Persian grammar and core vocabulary ensured that the language maintained its Iranian identity. The impact of the adoption of the Arabic alphabet on the future development of Persian was profound and lasting, as it shaped the way Persian would be written and read for over a millennium. The Arabic script that was adopted for Persian in the 9th and 10th centuries has remained the primary writing system for Persian to the present day, with only minor modifications and refinements. The Persian alphabet, with its 32 letters including the 4 additional letters created for Persian sounds, has been used for all forms of Persian writing, from poetry and literature to administration and scholarship. The adoption of the Arabic alphabet also meant that Persian calligraphy developed in close connection with Arabic calligraphy, as Persian calligraphers adapted and refined the scripts used for Arabic to create distinctive Persian styles of writing. The visual beauty of Persian calligraphy became an important element of Persian art and culture, with master calligraphers creating works of extraordinary beauty that combined the visual elegance of the Arabic script with the expressive power of the Persian language. The adoption of the Arabic alphabet thus had implications that extended far beyond the practical matter of representing sounds, shaping the aesthetic and cultural dimensions of Persian written expression for centuries. The incorporation of Arabic vocabulary into Persian represents one of the most significant and enduring consequences of the Islamic conquest, as thousands of Arabic words entered the Persian language and transformed its lexical resources while leaving its grammatical structure essentially intact. The process of lexical borrowing from Arabic began in the early years after the conquest, as Persian speakers came into contact with Arabic through the Islamic State, the Islamic religion, and the Arab settlers who established themselves in the former Sasanian territories. Initially, Arabic loanwords entered Persian primarily in the domains of religion and administration, as these were the areas where Arabic was most dominant and where Persian speakers had the greatest need for new vocabulary. Words related to Islamic religious practice, such as namaz, prayer, which was borrowed from Arabic salat, and roza, fasting, which was borrowed from Arabic psalm, entered the Persian language during this early period. Administrative terms such as wazir, minister, diwan, register, and carriage, land tax, also entered Persian from Arabic, reflecting the integration of Persian administrative practices into the Islamic State. The expansion of Arabic vocabulary in Persian accelerated during the Abbasid period, as the intellectual and cultural life of the Islamic world flourished and Persian scholars and writers engaged deeply with Arabic language and literature. The translation movement that brought Greek, Persian, and Indian works into Arabic created a rich vocabulary of philosophical and scientific terms that then entered Persian from Arabic. Words such as falsafa, philosophy, mantiq, logic, hala, matter, and tabia, nature, entered Persian from Arabic during this period, providing Persian speakers with the vocabulary necessary to discuss the intellectual achievements of Islamic civilization. The development of Islamic religious sciences, including law, theology, and mysticism, also contributed to the expansion of Arabic vocabulary in Persian, as Persian scholars who studied these disciplines in Arabic brought the technical terminology of these fields into their native language. The result was a Persian lexicon that was vastly enriched by Arabic borrowings, capable of expressing the full range of Islamic religious, philosophical, and scientific concepts. The relationship between native Persian vocabulary and Arabic loanwords was complex and varied across different genres and registers of language. In poetry, particularly in the early New Persian poetry of the Samanid period, poets often preferred native Persian vocabulary, drawing on the rich resources of the Iranian linguistic tradition to create verses that were distinctly Persian in their lexical character. The poetry of Radaki and other early Persian poets demonstrates a preference for Persian words and expressions, even as Arabic loanwords appear in contexts related to religion and learned culture. In prose, particularly in works of philosophy, theology, and science, the proportion of Arabic vocabulary was often much higher, as these genres dealt with concepts and ideas that had been developed primarily in Arabic and for which Persian lacked adequate native vocabulary. Some medieval Persian philosophical and theological texts consist largely of Arabic vocabulary arranged according to Persian grammar, creating a style that is sometimes called a hybrid language and that reflects the deep integration of Persian into the Islamic intellectual tradition. The persistence of Persian grammar despite the massive influx of Arabic vocabulary demonstrates the resilience of the linguistic structure of Persian and the limits of Arabic influence on the language. While Persian absorbed thousands of Arabic words, it did not adopt Arabic grammar, and the fundamental structure of the language remained Iranian. Persian sentence structure, with its subject-object-verb-word order, its use of prepositions rather than case endings, and its system of verbal morphology, remained distinct from Arabic, which has a verb-subject-object-word order, a system of case endings, and a different system of verbal morphology. The Persian grammatical system actually became simpler over time, as the complex case system of Middle Persian was gradually replaced by a simpler system based on prepositions and word order. This grammatical simplification was part of a broader trend in the evolution of Iranian languages and was not caused by Arabic influence, though the contact with Arabic may have accelerated certain developments. The result was a language that combined a simplified Iranian grammar with a vastly enriched vocabulary, creating a medium of expression that was both accessible and capable of great sophistication. The comparison between the influence of Arabic on Persian and the influence of Latin on European languages provides a useful framework for understanding the nature of the lexical enrichment that Persian experienced. Just as Latin served as the language of religion, scholarship, and administration in medieval Europe, providing loanwords to English, French, Spanish, and other European languages, Arabic served similar functions in the Islamic world, providing loanwords to Persian, Turkish, Urdu, and other Islamic languages. The influence of Latin on English was particularly strong in the domains of religion, law, science, and abstract thought, precisely the domains in which Arabic influenced Persian most strongly. English speakers today use many Latin-derived words without being aware of their origins, just as Persian speakers use many Arabic-derived words without recognizing their foreign source. The parallel between Latin and Arabic as prestige languages that enrich the vocabulary of other languages demonstrates that the process of lexical borrowing that Persian experienced was not unique but rather part of a broader pattern of linguistic contact and exchange. The enrichment of Persian vocabulary through Arabic loanwords had both positive and negative consequences for the language. On the positive side, the absorption of Arabic vocabulary greatly expanded the expressive capacity of Persian, allowing it to serve as a medium for discussing the full range of Islamic religious, philosophical, and scientific concepts. The availability of Arabic loanwords also gave Persian writers access to the rich literary and intellectual traditions of the Islamic world, enabling them to participate in the broader cultural conversation of Islamic civilization. On the negative side, the massive influx of Arabic vocabulary sometimes threatened to overwhelm the native Persian lexicon, particularly in learned genres where Arabic loanwords dominated. Some Persian writers and scholars became so accustomed to using Arabic vocabulary that they produced texts that were almost entirely Arabic in their lexical character, even though the grammar remained Persian. This tendency was particularly pronounced in fields such as philosophy and theology, where the conceptual vocabulary was almost entirely Arabic in origin. The tension between native Persian vocabulary and Arabic loanwords would persist throughout the history of the language, with different writers and different periods showing different preferences for one or the other. The relationship between the Persian language and the Arabic language in the Islamic period was characterized by a complex and dynamic bilingualism that shaped the intellectual and cultural life of the Islamic world for centuries. Arabic, as the language of the Quran and of Islamic revelation, held a unique position of authority and prestige that no other language could match. The Quran was believed by Muslims to be the literal word of God, revealed in Arabic to the Prophet Muhammad, and this belief gave the Arabic language a sacred status that extended to all forms of religious expression. Islamic religious rituals, including the daily prayers, the recitation of the Quran, and the formulas of faith, were conducted in Arabic, and Muslims throughout the world learned at least some Arabic in order to participate in these rituals. The study of Islamic law, theology, and Quranic interpretation was conducted primarily in Arabic, as these disciplines were intimately tied to the language of the sacred texts and required mastery of Arabic to be properly understood. This religious authority of Arabic ensured that the language would remain central to Islamic civilization regardless of the political and cultural changes that occurred over time. The Persian language, despite lacking the religious authority of Arabic, developed its own domains of prestige and authority within the Islamic world, particularly in the areas of poetry, court culture, and literary expression. The Persian poetic tradition, which emerged in the 9th and 10th centuries and reached its first great flowering under the Samanid dynasty, established Persian as a language of extraordinary beauty and expressive power. Persian poets such as Radaki, Ferdowsi, and later Rumi and Hafiz created works of literature that were admired throughout the Islamic world and that established Persian as one of the great literary languages of human civilization. The Persian language also became associated with court culture and royal patronage, as Persian dynasties and their Turkish and Mongol successors adopted Persian as the language of their courts and patronized Persian literature and art. This association of Persian with royal patronage and literary excellence gave the language a prestige that rivaled, though never equaled, the religious authority of Arabic. The result was a linguistic landscape in which Arabic and Persian each had their own domains of authority, with Arabic dominating religion and scholarship and Persian dominating poetry and court culture. The experience of bilingualism among Persian intellectuals and scholars varied widely depending on their individual circumstances and the nature of their work. Many Persian scholars were fully bilingual, equally comfortable in Arabic and Persian, and produced works in both languages depending on the audience and the subject matter. The great philosopher and physician Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, wrote most of his philosophical and medical works in Arabic, which was the language of scholarship in the Islamic world, but also wrote some works in Persian, including a philosophical treatise dedicated to a Persian patron. The great historian al-Tabari, who was of Persian origin, wrote his universal history in Arabic, which was the language of historical scholarship, but his work was later translated into Persian for the benefit of Persian-speaking audiences. The poet Radaki, who served at the Samanid court, wrote in Persian, which was the language of poetry and court culture, but his poetry demonstrates familiarity with Arabic literary traditions and vocabulary. This bilingualism among Persian intellectuals allowed them to participate fully in the Arabic language scholarly culture of the Islamic world while also contributing to the development of Persian literature and culture. The relationship between Persian and Arabic in the Islamic world was not simply one of coexistence but also of mutual influence and enrichment, as each language drew on the resources of the other to expand its expressive capacity. Persian benefited enormously from the incorporation of Arabic vocabulary, which provided Persian speakers with a rich lexicon for discussing religious, philosophical, and scientific topics. At the same time, Arabic was enriched by contact with Persian, as Persian words entered Arabic in the domains of administration, court culture, and daily life. Words such as diwan, register, wazir, minister, and various terms for court ceremonies and administrative practices entered Arabic from Persian, reflecting the influence of Persian administrative traditions on the Islamic State. Persian literary forms and themes also influenced Arabic literature, particularly in the development of courtly poetry and the celebration of royal virtues. This mutual influence between Persian and Arabic created a linguistic and literary culture that was richer and more diverse than either language would have been in isolation, demonstrating the creative potential of linguistic contact and exchange. The role of Persian as a language of literature and culture in the Islamic world was particularly important in the eastern regions, where Persian served as a lingua franca for communication across ethnic and linguistic boundaries. The Eastern Islamic world, including Khorasan, Transoxiana, and eventually India, was characterized by extraordinary linguistic diversity, with speakers of Persian, Turkish, and various other languages living and working together. In this diverse environment, Persian served as a common language that facilitated communication and cultural exchange across ethnic boundaries. Turkish rulers, who conquered much of the Eastern Islamic world in the 11th and 12th centuries, adopted Persian as the language of administration and court culture, even as they maintained their Turkish language for military and private purposes. The Ghaznavid dynasty, founded by Turkish military commanders, patronized Persian literature and used Persian as the language of their court, establishing a model that would be followed by subsequent Turkish dynasties. This adoption of Persian by non-Persian rulers demonstrated the prestige and utility of the language and contributed to its spread far beyond the borders of Iran. The bilingualism that characterized the Persian intellectual tradition had important implications for the development of Islamic civilization as a whole, as it allowed Persian scholars and writers to serve as bridges between the Arabic language tradition of religious and philosophical scholarship and the Persian language tradition of poetry and court culture. Persian scholars who were fluent in both languages could translate works from one language to the other, making the achievements of Arabic scholarship accessible to Persian-speaking audiences and vice versa. The translation of al-Tabari's history from Arabic into Persian, for example, made the history of the Islamic world available to Persian-speaking readers who might not have been able to read the original Arabic. The translation of Persian poetry and literature into Arabic, while less common, also occurred and contributed to the enrichment of Arabic literature. This bridging function of bilingual Persian scholars was essential to the integration of Persian culture into the broader Islamic world, as it allowed ideas and literary forms to flow freely between the two linguistic communities. The result was a shared Islamic culture that was enriched by the contributions of both Arabic and Persian traditions. The rise of Persian dynasties in the Eastern Islamic world during the 9th and 10th centuries played a crucial role in the revival of Persian language and literature, as these dynasties created political and cultural environments in which Persian could flourish as a language of administration, court culture, and literary expression. The Tahirid dynasty, founded by Tahir ibn Hussein in 821, established the first autonomous Persian state in the Islamic world, ruling Khorasan and surrounding regions while acknowledging the suzerainty of the Abbasid Caliphate. The Tahirids were descendants of Persian aristocrats who had converted to Islam and risen through the Abbasid administration, and their rule represented the integration of Persian elites into the Islamic political order. While the Tahirids conducted their administration primarily in Arabic, following the established practice of the Abbasid state, their rule created a political space in which Persian cultural identity could be expressed and in which the conditions for the later revival of Persian literature could develop. The establishment of an autonomous Persian dynasty, even one that remained loyal to the Caliphate, was a significant step in the reassertion of Persian political and cultural identity within the Islamic world. The Safarid dynasty, founded by Yaqub ibn al-Layth al-Safar in 861, represented a more assertive expression of Persian identity and a more direct challenge to the authority of the Abbasid Caliphate. Yaqub, who rose from humble origins as a coppersmith to become a military leader, conquered much of eastern and southern Iran and even attempted to capture Baghdad itself. The Saffarids were notable for their promotion of Persian culture and their use of Persian language in their court and administration. According to tradition, when a poet recited verses in Arabic at Yaqub's court, Yaqub demanded that the poet compose in Persian, saying that he did not understand Arabic. This anecdote, whether or not it is historically accurate, illustrates the Safarid commitment to Persian language and culture, and their rejection of the cultural dominance of Arabic. The Safarid period saw the first significant use of Persian as a language of court poetry, as poets composed verses in Persian for the entertainment and glorification of Safarid rulers. This Safarid patronage of Persian poetry laid the foundation for the flowering of Persian literature under the Samanids. The Samanid dynasty, which ruled Khorasan and Transoxiana from 819 to 999, represented the fullest expression of Persian cultural revival within an Islamic framework, as the Samanid rulers actively patronized Persian literature, promoted Persian administration, and celebrated their Iranian heritage. The Samanids claimed descent from Bahram Chobin, a Sasanian general who had briefly usurped the throne in the late 6th century, establishing a genealogical connection to the pre-Islamic Persian past that legitimized their rule in Iranian terms. The Samanid capital at Bokhara became a major center of Persian culture, attracting poets, scholars, and artists from throughout the Eastern Islamic world. The Samanid court was conducted in Persian, and the dynasty actively promoted the development of new Persian literature as a medium for expressing Iranian identity within an Islamic context. The poet Radaki, who served at the Samanid court, composed the first major works of new Persian poetry, establishing literary forms and conventions that would be developed by later poets. The Samanid period also saw the production of important works in Persian prose, including historical works that preserved the memory of the pre-Islamic Iranian past for Persian-speaking audiences. The patronage of Persian literature by the Samanid dynasty was motivated by a complex combination of cultural pride, political calculation, and practical necessity. The Samanids, as rulers of a vast and diverse territory, needed a language that could serve as a medium of communication and cultural expression for their subjects. Arabic, as the language of religion and scholarship, remained important, but it was not the native language of the majority of the Samanid subjects, who spoke Persian and other Iranian languages. By patronizing Persian literature and promoting Persian as a language of administration, the Samanids were able to communicate more effectively with their subjects and to build a sense of shared identity and loyalty among the diverse populations of their realm. The patronage of Persian literature also served as a source of legitimacy for the Samanid rulers, who presented themselves as heirs to the Sasanian tradition and as champions of Iranian culture. By supporting poets who celebrated the glories of the Iranian past and the virtues of the Samanid rulers, the dynasty was able to claim a cultural authority that complemented its political and military power. The Samanid patronage of Persian literature thus served both practical and ideological functions, contributing to the stability and legitimacy of their rule. The flourishing of Persian literature under the Samanids had consequences that extended far beyond the borders of the Samanid state, as the literary forms and conventions established during this period would be adopted and developed by subsequent generations of Persian writers throughout the Islamic world. The poetry of Radaki and other Samanid period poets established the forms of Persian lyric and panegyric poetry that would be used by later poets, including the great masters of Persian literature such as Ferdowsi, Rumi, and Hafiz. The prose works of the Samanid period, including historical chronicles and works of advice literature, established models for Persian prose writing that would be followed by later authors. The Samanid translation of al-Tabari's history from Arabic into Persian, undertaken at the request of the Samanid ruler Mansur ibn, made the history of the Islamic world available to Persian-speaking audiences and established Persian as a language suitable for serious historical scholarship. The Samanid achievement in promoting Persian literature created a foundation upon which the great literary traditions of the Persianate world would be built, demonstrating the enduring significance of this period in the history of the Persian language. The example of the Samanid dynasty in patronizing Persian literature while remaining fully committed to Islam demonstrated that it was possible to be both Muslim and Persian, and this demonstration had profound implications for the future development of Islamic civilization. The Samanid synthesis of Iranian cultural identity and Islamic religious faith provided a model that would be followed by subsequent dynasties throughout the Islamic world, from the Ghaznavids and Seljuks in the 11th and 12th centuries to the Mughals in India and the Timurids in Central Asia. The idea that one could be proud of one's Persian heritage while remaining a devout Muslim became a defining feature of Persianate Islamic culture, shaping the way that Persians and non-Persians alike understood their place within the Islamic world. The Samanid achievement thus represented not merely a political or cultural development, but a fundamental transformation in the relationship between Iranian identity and Islamic religion, a transformation that would have lasting consequences for the history of the Islamic world. The Persian language, which the Samanids did so much to promote, became the primary vehicle for this synthesis of Iranian and Islamic identity, carrying the values and traditions of both cultures to new generations and new regions. The role of literature in preserving and transmitting Persian language and culture represents one of the most important chapters in the history of the language, as poetry and prose served as fortresses within which the language could survive and flourish even as political and religious circumstances changed dramatically. The Persian literary tradition that emerged in the 9th and 10th centuries was built on foundations laid by earlier generations of Persian speakers who had maintained the language through centuries of Arabic dominance. The oral traditions of the Iranian peoples, including epic tales, songs, and proverbs, had preserved the Persian language and its cultural heritage through the period of transition from Sasanian to Islamic rule. These oral traditions provided the raw material from which the written literature of New Persian would be created, as poets and writers drew on the rich resources of Iranian folklore and legend to create works that were both artistically sophisticated and deeply rooted in Iranian cultural tradition. The emergence of written Persian literature in the Samanid period represented the culmination of this process of preservation and transformation, as the spoken language of the people became a literary medium capable of expressing the highest achievements of Islamic civilization. The poetry of the early New Persian period was characterized by a remarkable range of themes and forms, reflecting the diverse cultural influences that shaped the development of the language. The panegyric poem, which praised rulers and patrons and celebrated their virtues and achievements, was one of the most important genres of early Persian poetry, reflecting the close relationship between poetry and court culture. Poets such as Radaki composed elaborate panegyrics that praised the Samanid rulers for their wisdom, justice, and generosity, using the conventions of Persian poetry to create works of art that also served political functions. The lyric poem, which expressed personal emotions and reflections on love, nature, and the passage of time, was another important genre that developed during this period. The didactic poem, which conveyed moral and practical wisdom, drew on both Iranian and Islamic traditions of advice literature. These diverse genres demonstrated the flexibility and expressive power of the Persian language, which was capable of serving the needs of everything from courtly entertainment to spiritual instruction. The poetry of the early New Persian period established standards of excellence that would influence Persian literature for centuries. The Shahnameh of Ferdowsi, composed in the late 10th and early 11th centuries, represents the supreme achievement of early New Persian literature and the most important work in the entire Persian literary tradition. Ferdowsi, who spent over 3 decades composing this massive epic poem of approximately 60,000 couplets, created a work that narrates the history of Iran from the mythical first kings to the fall of the Sasanian Empire. The poem is organized around the reigns of 50 kings and emperors, divided into 3 major sections: the mythical age, the heroic age, and the historical age. The mythical age tells of the first kings and the establishment of civilization, while the heroic age, the longest and most beloved section, recounts the exploits of heroes such as Rostam, the greatest champion of Iranian legend. The historical age narrates the more recent history of the Achaemenid, Parthian, and Sasanian dynasties, drawing on historical traditions that had been preserved through oral transmission and written sources. Through this monumental work, Ferdowsi preserved the memory of Iran's ancient past in a form that could be embraced by subsequent generations of Iranians living within the Islamic world. The significance of the Shahnameh for the preservation of Persian language and culture cannot be overstated, as the poem demonstrated that Persian was capable of expressing the full range of human experience, from the heights of heroic achievement to the depths of tragic loss. Ferdowsi's language, refined and elevated New Persian, established a standard for literary expression that would influence Persian literature for a millennium. The vocabulary and syntax of the Shahnameh drew primarily on the native Persian tradition, with relatively little Arabic influence, demonstrating that Persian could serve as a literary medium without relying heavily on Arabic loanwords. This demonstration was important for the cultural self-confidence of Persian speakers, as it proved that their language was not merely a dialect of Arabic, or a vehicle for the expression of Islamic concepts derived from Arabic sources, but a language with its own rich literary tradition capable of rivaling the achievements of Arabic literature. The Shahnameh also preserved the memory of Iranian heroes and kings, including figures such as Rostam, Sohrab, and Esfandiyar, whose stories would become part of the shared cultural heritage of the Persian-speaking world. The relationship between the Shahnameh and Islam was complex and has been interpreted in different ways by scholars. Ferdowsi was himself a Muslim, and the poem contains references to Islamic beliefs and concepts, but its primary focus is on the pre-Islamic Iranian past, which is presented in a positive light rather than condemned as ignorance and polytheism. This celebration of pre-Islamic heritage was controversial in some quarters, and Ferdowsi faced criticism from some religious authorities for what they saw as excessive devotion to the ancient Iranian past. However, the Shahnameh was also widely embraced by Muslim rulers and audiences who saw no contradiction between Islamic faith and pride in Iranian heritage. The poem was copied, illustrated, and recited at courts throughout the Persian-speaking world, and its stories became part of the shared cultural heritage of Islamic civilization. The Shahnameh demonstrated that it was possible to be a devout Muslim and still celebrate the achievements of pre-Islamic Iranian civilization, providing a model of cultural identity that would prove enduring. The poem's integration of Iranian and Islamic elements created a synthesis that would shape Persian culture for centuries. The influence of the Shahnameh on subsequent Persian literature and culture was profound and enduring, as the poem provided a repository of stories, characters, and themes that would be drawn upon by countless later writers and artists. The heroes and villains of the Shahnameh became familiar figures in Persian art and iconography, appearing on everything from ceramics to textiles to architectural decoration. The values celebrated in the Shahnameh, including courage, loyalty, hospitality, and justice, became central to Persian cultural identity and influenced social norms and expectations. The poem's language and imagery permeated Persian culture, providing a shared vocabulary and symbolic framework that connected Iranians across regions and social classes. The recitation of Shahnameh stories, known as Nakali, became a popular form of entertainment and cultural transmission, with storytellers performing episodes from the epic for audiences in coffee houses and at festivals. Through these multiple channels of influence, the Shahnameh became not just a literary work but a foundation of Persian cultural identity, ensuring that the language and values it embodied would be transmitted to future generations. The paradox of Ferdowsi represents one of the most fascinating aspects of Persian cultural history. As a Muslim poet composed the greatest literary monument of pre-Islamic Iranian civilization, creating a work that celebrates the ancient past within the context of Islamic society. Ferdowsi lived in a world that had been thoroughly transformed by the Islamic conquest, where the old Zoroastrian religion had been largely replaced by Islam, and where Arabic had become the dominant language of religion and scholarship. Yet Ferdowsi devoted his life to composing a massive epic poem that narrated the history of pre-Islamic Iran, celebrating the achievements of kings and heroes who had lived before the coming of Islam. This paradox was not accidental but reflected the complex cultural situation of the Persian-speaking world in the 10th and 11th centuries, where the memory of the pre-Islamic past remained a vital part of cultural identity even as Islam had become the dominant religion. Ferdowsi's achievement was to find a way to preserve this memory within an Islamic framework, creating a work that could be embraced by Muslims while celebrating the heritage of pre-Islamic Iran. The Shahnameh is not a simple rejection of Islam or a nostalgic lament for the lost glories of the Sasanian Empire. Rather, it is a complex work that integrates Iranian and Islamic elements into a synthesis that reflects the realities of Persian cultural identity in the Islamic period. Ferdowsi does not present the pre-Islamic past as a golden age that should be restored, nor does he condemn Islam as a foreign imposition that destroyed Iranian civilization. Instead, he presents the history of Iran as a continuous narrative that extends from the mythical first kings to the present day, encompassing both the pre-Islamic and Islamic periods as parts of a single story. The poem acknowledges the coming of Islam and the end of the Sasanian dynasty, treating these events as part of the unfolding of history rather than as a rupture that divided Iranian identity into irreconcilable parts. This integration of Iranian and Islamic elements allowed the Shahnameh to serve as a bridge between the pre-Islamic and Islamic periods of Iranian history, preserving the memory of the past while embracing the present. The preservation of pre-Islamic Iranian traditions within the Shahnameh was made possible by the literary form of the poem, which transformed historical and legendary material into a work of art that could be appreciated on aesthetic grounds regardless of its religious content. The stories of Rostam and other heroes were not presented as religious narratives that conflicted with Islamic teachings, but as literary creations that celebrated human virtues and achievements. The kings and heroes of the Shahnameh were not presented as objects of religious veneration, but as exemplars of courage, wisdom, and justice whose achievements could inspire contemporary readers. This literary framing of pre-Islamic material allowed the Shahnameh to preserve Iranian cultural memory without directly challenging Islamic religious authority. The poem could be read and enjoyed by Muslims as a work of literature, even as it preserved the memory of a past that was no longer religiously authoritative. This literary approach to cultural memory would prove remarkably successful, as the Shahnameh became one of the most widely read and admired works in the Persian-speaking world. The language of the Shahnameh itself was a crucial element in the preservation of Persian identity, as Ferdowsi deliberately chose to write in a Persian that was relatively free of Arabic loanwords, demonstrating that the language could serve as a literary medium in its own right. Ferdowsi's Persian drew primarily on the native resources of the language, using vocabulary and syntax that were distinctly Iranian rather than borrowed from Arabic. This linguistic choice was significant, as it demonstrated that Persian was not merely a degraded form of Arabic, or a vehicle for the expression of ideas that could only be adequately expressed in Arabic, but a language with its own literary resources capable of rivaling the achievements of Arabic literature. Ferdowsi's pride in the Persian language is evident throughout the Shahnameh, and the poem itself became a monument to the expressive power of Persian. The language of the Shahnameh established a standard for Persian literary expression that would influence subsequent generations of Persian writers, who looked to Ferdowsi as the supreme master of their language. The cultural significance of Ferdowsi's achievement extends far beyond the literary value of the Shahnameh, as the poem played a crucial role in the formation of Persian cultural identity within the Islamic world. By preserving the memory of pre-Islamic Iranian kings and heroes in a literary form that could be embraced by Muslims, Ferdowsi created a cultural foundation upon which subsequent generations could build. The Shahnameh provided Persians with a sense of historical continuity that connected them to their ancient past, even as they lived in a present that was defined by Islam. This sense of continuity was essential to the maintenance of Persian cultural identity, as it allowed Persians to see themselves as heirs to a great civilization that had existed long before the coming of Islam. The Shahnameh also provided a shared cultural vocabulary and a set of stories and characters that connected Persians across regions and social classes, creating a sense of common identity that transcended political and religious divisions. Through the Shahnameh, Ferdowsi gave the Persian people a literary monument that preserved their cultural identity within an Islamic context. The legacy of Ferdowsi and the Shahnameh demonstrates the capacity of literature to preserve cultural memory and identity through periods of profound change. Ferdowsi composed his epic at a time when the memory of pre-Islamic Iran was in danger of being lost, as generations grew up knowing little of the kings and heroes who had ruled before the Arab conquest. By committing these stories to a monumental literary form, Ferdowsi ensured that they would survive and continue to inspire future generations. The Shahnameh proved adaptable to changing circumstances, as subsequent generations found new meanings and applications for its stories within different political and cultural contexts. The poem remained a source of cultural pride and identity through the vicissitudes of Iranian history, including foreign conquests, dynastic changes, and religious transformations. The endurance of the Shahnameh as a cultural monument testifies to the power of literature to preserve cultural memory across centuries, and to the resilience of Persian identity in the face of historical change. Ferdowsi's achievement demonstrates that the loss of political power does not necessarily entail the loss of cultural voice, and that a language can preserve the memory of a people even when their political institutions have disappeared. The relationship between Persian and Arabic in the Islamic world was marked by a complex interplay of competition and cooperation, as each language possessed distinct domains of prestige and authority while also enriching the other through contact and exchange. Arabic, as the language of the Quran and of Islamic revelation, held a unique position of authority that no other language could challenge. The sacred status of Arabic extended to all forms of religious expression, and mastery of Arabic was essential for anyone seeking to engage seriously with Islamic religious scholarship. This religious authority of Arabic ensured that the language would remain central to Islamic civilization regardless of the political and cultural changes that occurred over time. Arabic was also the primary language of scholarship in many fields, including Islamic law, theology, Quranic interpretation, and the sciences, as the intellectual traditions of Islamic civilization had been developed primarily in Arabic during the early centuries of Islamic rule. This scholarly authority of Arabic meant that serious intellectual work in many fields required knowledge of Arabic, even for those whose native language was Persian or another language of the Islamic world. Persian, despite lacking the religious authority of Arabic, developed its own domains of prestige and authority within the Islamic world, particularly in the areas of poetry, court culture, and literary expression. The Persian poetic tradition, which emerged in the 9th and 10th centuries and reached its first great flowering under the Samanid dynasty, established Persian as a language of extraordinary beauty and expressive power. Persian poets created works of literature that were admired throughout the Islamic world and that established Persian as one of the great literary languages of human civilization. The Persian language also became associated with court culture and royal patronage, as Persian dynasties and their Turkish and Mongol successors adopted Persian as the language of their courts and patronized Persian literature and art. This association of Persian with royal patronage and literary excellence gave the language a prestige that rivaled, though never equaled, the religious authority of Arabic. The result was a linguistic landscape in which Arabic and Persian each had their own domains of authority, with Arabic dominating religion and scholarship and Persian dominating poetry and court culture. The coexistence of Arabic and Persian as prestige languages in the Islamic world created opportunities for bilingualism and cultural exchange that enriched both languages and the civilization they served. Many Persian intellectuals and scholars were fully bilingual, equally comfortable in Arabic and Persian, and produced works in both languages depending on the audience and the subject matter. The great philosopher and physician Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, wrote most of his philosophical and medical works in Arabic, which was the language of scholarship in the Islamic world, but also wrote some works in Persian, including a philosophical treatise dedicated to a Persian patron. The great historian al-Tabari, who was of Persian origin, wrote his Universal History in Arabic, which was the language of historical scholarship, but his work was later translated into Persian for the benefit of Persian-speaking audiences. This bilingualism among Persian intellectuals allowed them to participate fully in the Arabic language scholarly culture of the Islamic world while also contributing to the development of Persian literature and culture. The ability to move between languages was a valuable skill in the Islamic world, and bilingual individuals often served as bridges between different cultural and linguistic communities. The mutual influence between Persian and Arabic extended to vocabulary, as each language borrowed extensively from the other in different domains. Persian borrowed thousands of Arabic words in the fields of religion, law, philosophy, science, and administration, reflecting the dominance of Arabic in these areas of Islamic civilization. Words such as kitab, book, ilm, knowledge, din, religion, adl, justice, and hukm, judgment, entered Persian from Arabic and became deeply embedded in the Persian lexicon. At the same time, Arabic borrowed Persian words in the domains of administration, court culture, and daily life, reflecting the influence of Persian administrative traditions and courtly practices on the Islamic state. Words such as diwan, register, wazir, minister, and various terms for court ceremonies and administrative practices entered Arabic from Persian, demonstrating the practical importance of Persian bureaucratic traditions in the new Islamic order. This mutual borrowing enriched both languages and created a shared vocabulary that facilitated communication and cultural exchange across linguistic boundaries. The prestige of Arabic as the language of the Quran created a situation in which knowledge of Arabic was essential for religious authority and scholarly credibility throughout the Islamic world. Persian scholars who wished to contribute to Islamic religious scholarship had to master Arabic, as the primary texts of Islamic law, theology, and Quranic interpretation were written in Arabic and the scholarly community communicated primarily in Arabic. This requirement of Arabic mastery for religious scholarship meant that Persian religious scholars were necessarily bilingual, moving between Arabic for their scholarly work and Persian for their daily lives and interactions with Persian-speaking communities. The bilingualism of Persian religious scholars had important consequences for the development of Islamic religious thought in the Persian-speaking world, as these scholars were able to translate and transmit Arabic religious scholarship to Persian-speaking audiences while also bringing Persian cultural perspectives to bear on Islamic religious questions. The result was a distinctly Persian form of Islamic religious culture that was fully orthodox in its commitment to Islamic principles while also reflecting Persian cultural sensibilities and traditions. The relationship between Persian and Arabic in the Islamic world was not static but evolved over time, as the relative prestige and functions of the two languages changed in response to political and cultural developments. The early Islamic period, when Arabic dominance was most pronounced, was characterized by a clear linguistic hierarchy in which Arabic was the language of religion, administration, and high culture, while Persian was relegated to the status of a spoken language with little literary presence. The emergence of Persian dynasties in the 9th and 10th centuries began to challenge this hierarchy, as Persian rulers patronized Persian literature and promoted Persian as a language of administration and court culture. The rise of Persian literature, culminating in the Shahnameh Ferdowsi, established Persian as a literary language of the highest quality, capable of rivaling Arabic in expressive power and artistic achievement. The spread of Persianate culture throughout the Eastern Islamic world and beyond further enhanced the prestige of Persian, as the language became associated with the refined court culture and literary excellence of the Persianate world. By the medieval period, Persian had achieved a status within the Islamic world that was second only to Arabic in prestige and influence, and in some regions and contexts, Persian was the preferred language of literary and cultural expression. The expansion of Persian beyond the borders of Iran represents one of the most remarkable developments in the history of the language, as Persian became a language of international culture and administration across a vast region stretching from Anatolia to India. The spread of Persian was closely tied to the spread of Islam and the emergence of Persianate culture, as Persian language and literary traditions accompanied Islamic religion and Persian cultural forms to new regions and new peoples. The prestige of Persian literature, particularly the poetry of Ferdowsi, Rumi, and other great Persian writers, gave the language a cultural authority that extended far beyond the borders of the Persian-speaking world. Persian became the language of court culture and high literature for rulers and elites throughout the Eastern Islamic world, regardless of their ethnic origins or native languages. This expansion of Persian was not the result of political conquest or linguistic imperialism, but rather of cultural prestige and practical utility, as Persian offered a sophisticated literary tradition and a flexible administrative language that served the needs of diverse societies. The adoption of Persian by non-Persian dynasties represents one of the most striking features of Persianate culture, as rulers of Turkish, Mongol, and other origins embraced Persian as the language of their courts and administrations. The Ghaznavid dynasty, founded by Turkish military commanders in the late 10th century, adopted Persian as the language of their court and patronized Persian literature, even as they maintained their Turkish military traditions. The Seljuk dynasty, which conquered much of the Middle East in the 11th century, similarly adopted Persian administrative practices and patronized Persian literature, establishing a model of Turkish rule that was culturally Persianate. The Mongol Ilkhanid dynasty, which ruled Iran in the 13th and 14th centuries, adopted Persian as the language of administration and patronized Persian literature and art, even as they maintained connections to the wider Mongol world. The Timurid dynasty, founded by the Central Asian conqueror Timur in the 14th century, presided over a brilliant flowering of Persianate culture, patronizing poets, artists, and scholars who created some of the greatest works of Persian art and literature. This pattern of non-Persian rulers embracing Persian culture demonstrates the prestige and influence of Persianate civilization. The role of Persian as a language of administration in the medieval Islamic world was particularly important in the eastern regions, where Persian served as a lingua franca for communication across ethnic and linguistic boundaries. The administrative systems of the Ghaznavid, Seljuk, and Mughal empires were conducted in Persian, which served as the language of official documents, correspondence, and court records. The use of Persian for administration required the development of a sophisticated technical vocabulary and standardized forms of expression that could be used consistently across the vast territories of these empires. Persian administrative terminology, including terms for taxation, land tenure, and official titles, became standardized and was used throughout the Persianate world. The use of Persian for administration also contributed to the spread of the language, as officials and bureaucrats throughout the empire needed to learn Persian in order to participate in the administrative system. This administrative use of Persian was particularly important in India, where the Mughal Empire used Persian as the language of government for several centuries, creating a Persian literate class of administrators and officials. The spread of Persian to India represents one of the most significant chapters in the history of the language, as Persian became deeply embedded in the political and cultural life of the Indian subcontinent. The Ghaznavid and Ghurid conquests of northern India in the 11th and 12th centuries brought Persian-speaking rulers and administrators to the subcontinent, establishing Persian as the language of government and high culture. The Delhi Sultanate, which ruled much of northern India from the 13th to the 16th centuries, was thoroughly Persianate in its culture, with Persian serving as the language of administration and literary expression. The Mughal Empire, which ruled most of India from the 16th to the 18th centuries, continued and extended this Persianate tradition, patronizing Persian literature and using Persian as the language of government. The influence of Persian on Indian languages, particularly Urdu, which emerged as a synthesis of Persian and local Indian languages, demonstrates the depth of Persianate cultural influence in the subcontinent. The Persianate tradition in India produced major works of literature, history, and philosophy that contributed to the development of a distinctive Indo-Persian culture that would have lasting consequences for the region. The expansion of Persian into Central Asia and the Caucasus represented another important dimension of the spread of the language, as Persian became the language of culture and administration in these regions alongside the local languages. The cities of Central Asia, including Samarkand, Bokhara, and Herat, became major centers of Persian culture, attracting poets, scholars, and artists from throughout the Islamic world. The Timurid dynasty, which ruled much of Central Asia in the 14th and 15th centuries, patronized Persian literature and art, creating a brilliant cultural flowering that would influence the development of Persianate culture throughout the region. In the Caucasus, Persian served as the language of administration and high culture for several centuries, particularly in the regions that were under Persian political control or cultural influence. The influence of Persian on the languages of the Caucasus, including Azerbaijani Turkish, demonstrates the depth of Persianate cultural penetration in this region. The spread of Persian to Central Asia and the Caucasus created a vast cultural sphere in which Persian served as the primary medium of literary and administrative expression. The expansion of Persian as a language of international culture reached its peak in the medieval and early modern periods, when Persian was spoken and written across a vast region stretching from the Balkans to Bengal. The traveler Ibn Battuta, who journeyed through much of the Islamic world in the 14th century, noted that Persian was spoken and understood in many of the regions he visited, including Central Asia, India, and Anatolia. The use of Persian as a lingua franca facilitated communication and cultural exchange across this vast region, creating connections between distant communities and enabling the movement of ideas, people, and goods. The Persian language thus served as a unifying force in a region of extraordinary diversity, providing a common medium of expression for peoples of many different ethnic and linguistic backgrounds. The international character of Persian in this period demonstrates the remarkable success of the language in adapting to new environments and serving the needs of diverse societies, while maintaining its essential Iranian identity. The Persian language, which had once been spoken primarily in the Iranian plateau, had become a world language, carrying Iranian culture and Islamic civilization to new regions and new peoples. The influence of Persian on the Indian subcontinent represents one of the most significant and enduring legacies of the Persianate world, as Persian language and literary traditions became deeply embedded in the political, cultural, and linguistic life of India over the course of nearly a millennium. The arrival of Persian-speaking rulers and administrators in India began with the Ghaznavid conquests of the 11th century, which brought the Punjab and surrounding regions under the control of a dynasty that was thoroughly Persianate in its culture. The Ghaznavid ruler Mahmud, who conducted numerous campaigns in India, was a major patron of Persian literature, and his court attracted poets and scholars from throughout the Persian-speaking world. The Ghaznavid conquests established a pattern of Persian-speaking Muslim rule in India that would continue under subsequent dynasties, including the Ghurids, the Delhi Sultanate, and the Mughal Empire. This pattern of rule created a need for Persian-speaking administrators, scholars, and officials, who formed a Persianate elite that would shape the political and cultural life of India for centuries. The Delhi Sultanate, which ruled much of northern India from the 13th to the 16th centuries, was thoroughly Persianate in its culture, with Persian serving as the language of administration, court culture, and literary expression. The rulers of the Delhi Sultanate, who were of Turkish and Afghan origin, adopted Persian as the language of their court and patronized Persian literature and scholarship. The poet Amir Khusro, who lived in the 13th and 14th centuries and is considered one of the greatest poets of the Persian language, served at the courts of several Delhi sultans and composed works in both Persian and Hindavi, the early form of Urdu. Amir Khusro's work demonstrates the cultural synthesis that characterized the Persianate tradition in India, as he drew on both Persian literary traditions and Indian cultural elements to create works that were distinctive and innovative. The Delhi Sultanate also saw the development of a Persian literate administrative class, as Indian Muslims and Hindus learned Persian in order to participate in the government and to gain access to the cultural and social prestige associated with the language. The Mughal Empire, which ruled most of India from the 16th to the 18th centuries, represented the fullest expression of Persianate culture in the subcontinent, as the Mughal rulers patronized Persian literature, art, and architecture on a grand scale. The Mughal Emperor Akbar, who ruled from 1556 to 1605, was a major patron of Persian culture, establishing a translation bureau that translated Sanskrit works into Persian and commissioning works of Persian literature and history. The Mughal court attracted Persian poets, scholars, and artists from throughout the Islamic world, creating a cultural environment that was thoroughly Persianate in its character. The use of Persian as the language of administration continued under the Mughals, and the empire's official records were kept in Persian. The influence of Persian on Indian languages, particularly Urdu, accelerated during the Mughal period, as Persian vocabulary and literary forms were incorporated into the developing language. The legacy of the Mughal period is visible today in the Persian loanwords that pervade Urdu and Hindi, as well as in the architectural monuments of the Mughal era, which combine Persian and Indian elements in distinctive and beautiful ways. The influence of Persian on Indian languages, particularly Urdu, represents one of the most concrete and enduring legacies of the Persianate tradition in India. Urdu, which emerged as a distinct language in the 17th and 18th centuries, is fundamentally an Indian language with a grammar that is based on the local languages of northern India, but its vocabulary has been heavily influenced by Persian and Arabic through Persian. A large proportion of Urdu vocabulary, particularly in the domains of administration, literature, philosophy, and abstract thought, is derived from Persian, reflecting the centuries of Persian cultural dominance in the subcontinent. The script used for Urdu is a modified version of the Persian script, which is itself a modified version of the Arabic script, demonstrating the direct linguistic connection between Urdu and Persian. The poetry of Urdu, which developed in the 18th and 19th centuries, drew heavily on Persian literary conventions and forms, including the ghazal, which had been developed by Persian poets over centuries. The influence of Persian on Urdu demonstrates the depth of Persianate cultural penetration in the subcontinent, and the lasting impact of Persian literary traditions on the languages and cultures of India. The Indo-Persian literary tradition, which developed over the course of several centuries, produced major works of literature, history, and philosophy that represent a distinctive contribution to the broader Persian literary tradition. Indian poets and writers who composed in Persian, including Amir Khusro, Badil, and Kalib, created works that drew on both Persian literary traditions and Indian cultural elements, producing a literature that was both Persianate and distinctly Indian. The historical works produced in Persian by Indian scholars, including the chronicles of the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire, provide invaluable sources for understanding the political and cultural history of medieval and early modern India. The philosophical works produced in Persian by Indian thinkers, including the works of the great Mughal prince Dara Shikoh, who sought to reconcile Islamic and Hindu philosophical traditions, demonstrate the intellectual vitality of the Indo-Persian tradition. This Indo-Persian literary tradition enriched the broader Persian literary heritage and demonstrated the capacity of Persian to serve as a medium for cultural expression in diverse environments. The legacy of Persian in India extends to the present day, as Persian loanwords remain an integral part of the vocabulary of Urdu, Hindi, and other Indian languages, and as the literary and cultural traditions of the Persianate period continue to influence Indian culture. The Mughal architectural monuments, including the Taj Mahal, which combine Persian and Indian elements in extraordinary ways, stand as lasting testaments to the Persianate cultural tradition in India. The study of Persian literature and history remains an important part of the intellectual heritage of the subcontinent, and Persian texts are still studied and appreciated by scholars and enthusiasts in India and Pakistan. The influence of Persian on the languages and cultures of India demonstrates the remarkable capacity of the Persian language to adapt to new environments, and to serve as a medium for cultural expression across vast distances and diverse societies. The story of Persian in India is thus an essential part of the broader story of the Persian language and its remarkable survival and expansion in the centuries after the Arab conquest. The relationship between the Persian language and the Zoroastrian religious tradition represents an important dimension of the linguistic history of Iran, as Zoroastrian communities played a crucial role in preserving ancient Iranian language and culture even as they adapted to the changed circumstances of the Islamic period. The Zoroastrian priesthood, which had been the primary custodian of the Pahlavi script and the Middle Persian language during the Sasanian period, continued to maintain these traditions after the Arab conquest, even as the political and social environment became increasingly Islamic. Zoroastrian priests continued to copy and preserve religious texts in Pahlavi, ensuring that the sacred literature of their faith would not be lost despite the decline of the old script in administrative and secular contexts. The preservation of Pahlavi texts by Zoroastrian priests was a crucial factor in the survival of knowledge about the Middle Persian language and the pre-Islamic religious and literary traditions of Iran. Without this priestly preservation, much of the linguistic and cultural heritage of Sasanian Iran would have been lost to history. The compilation of Pahlavi texts in the 9th and 10th centuries represents one of the most significant achievements of the Zoroastrian community in the Islamic period, as priests gathered and organized the scattered religious literature of their faith into comprehensive collections. These compilations, which include works such as the Denkard, the Bundahishan, and the Art of Varufnamak, preserve a wealth of information about Zoroastrian theology, cosmology, ritual practice, and history. The Denkard, which means acts of religion, is a massive compendium of Zoroastrian religious knowledge that was compiled in the 9th and 10th centuries, drawing on earlier sources that had been preserved through oral tradition and manuscript transmission. The Bundahishn, which means primal creation, provides an account of Zoroastrian cosmology and the creation of the world, preserving ancient Iranian traditions about the origins and structure of the universe. These texts, written in Pahlavi, preserve the language and religious traditions of pre-Islamic Iran in forms that can be studied and appreciated by modern scholars. The compilation of these texts demonstrates the resilience of the Zoroastrian community and their determination to preserve their religious heritage in the face of difficult circumstances. The migration of Zoroastrians to India, where they became known as Parsis, represents another important chapter in the history of Persian language and culture, as these migrants carried their religious and linguistic traditions to a new homeland. Beginning in the 8th century and continuing in waves over subsequent centuries, groups of Zoroastrians fled persecution in Iran and settled in Gujarat, on the western coast of India, where they established communities that preserved their religious traditions. The Parsis maintained their fire temples, trained their priests, and transmitted their sacred texts in India, creating a center of Zoroastrian life that complemented the communities remaining in Iran. The Parsi community in India preserved knowledge of Pahlavi and the religious traditions associated with it, maintaining a connection to the pre-Islamic Iranian past that would otherwise have been lost. The relationship between the Parsi community in India and the Zoroastrian communities in Iran was maintained through correspondence, pilgrimage, and the exchange of religious knowledge, ensuring that neither community was completely isolated from the other. The Parsi experience demonstrates that the Islamization of Iran paradoxically contributed to the spread of Zoroastrianism beyond its homeland, as the pressures that converted most Iranians to Islam also drove some Zoroastrians to seek refuge elsewhere. The contribution of Zoroastrian communities to the preservation of Persian language and culture extended beyond the religious sphere to encompass the broader cultural heritage of pre-Islamic Iran. The Zoroastrian priests who preserved Pahlavi texts also preserved knowledge of the history, literature, and cultural traditions of the Sasanian period, including the stories and legends that would later be incorporated into works such as the Shahnameh. The Zoroastrian community maintained the celebration of traditional Iranian festivals such as Nowruz, the Persian New Year, which continued to be observed by Muslims and non-Muslims alike throughout the Islamic period. The Zoroastrian reverence for fire and light, which had been central to the pre-Islamic Iranian religious tradition, influenced the development of Persian culture and literature, contributing to the rich symbolic vocabulary of Persian poetry and art. The preservation of these cultural traditions by Zoroastrian communities ensured that the heritage of pre-Islamic Iran would not be completely lost, even as the majority of Iranians converted to Islam. The relationship between the Zoroastrian community and the broader Persian-speaking Muslim community was complex and varied over time, ranging from cooperation and cultural exchange to tension and persecution. In the early Islamic period, Zoroastrians and Muslims often lived side by side, and there was significant cultural exchange between the two communities. Muslim converts from Zoroastrian backgrounds brought with them knowledge of Iranian traditions and cultural practices that enriched the Islamic culture of the region. At the same time, Zoroastrian communities were subject to various restrictions and pressures under Islamic rule, including the payment of the jizya tax and limitations on their religious activities. The intensity of these pressures varied over time and by region, with periods of relative tolerance alternating with periods of harsher treatment. Despite these challenges, Zoroastrian communities persisted in Iran and India, maintaining their religious and cultural traditions through centuries of Islamic rule. The survival of Zoroastrianism to the present day demonstrates the resilience of the community and the capacity of religious traditions to endure through periods of profound change. The preservation of Pahlavi texts by Zoroastrian communities has been of immense importance for modern scholars seeking to understand the history and culture of pre-Islamic Iran. The Pahlavi texts provide a wealth of information about Zoroastrian theology, ritual practice, cosmology, and history that would otherwise be unavailable, and they have been essential to the modern study of Iranian religions and the Iranian past. The decipherment and interpretation of Pahlavi texts has been a major focus of Iranian studies, as scholars have worked to reconstruct the language and the religious traditions preserved in these texts. The contribution of Zoroastrian communities to the preservation of this material has been invaluable, as their commitment to maintaining their religious heritage ensured that these texts would survive to be studied by future generations. The story of Zoroastrian preservation of Pahlavi demonstrates the importance of religious communities in the transmission of cultural heritage, and the role that dedicated individuals and institutions can play in preserving knowledge through periods of historical change. The transformation of Persian from the Middle Persian of the Sasanian period to the New Persian of the Islamic period was not a defeat, but rather a remarkable adaptation that allowed the language to survive and flourish in radically changed circumstances. The Persian language that emerged from this transformation was different from the language of the Sasanian court, just as the Islamic Iran of the 10th century was different from the Sasanian Empire of the 7th century. The grammar of Persian had been simplified, as the complex case system of Middle Persian gave way to a simpler system based on prepositions and word order. The vocabulary of Persian had been enriched by the incorporation of thousands of Arabic loanwords, which provided Persian speakers with new resources for expressing religious, philosophical, and scientific concepts. The writing system of Persian had been transformed, as the difficult Pahlavi script gave way to a modified version of the Arabic alphabet that was more accessible and better suited to the needs of the Islamic world. These changes were significant, but they did not alter the essential identity of Persian as an Iranian language with deep roots in the linguistic and cultural traditions of the Iranian peoples. The grammatical structure of Persian remained fundamentally Iranian despite the massive influence of Arabic on the vocabulary of the language. The basic word order of Persian, with the subject and object preceding the verb, remained unchanged from Middle Persian to New Persian, distinguishing Persian from Arabic, which has a different word order. The verbal system of Persian, with its system of tense, aspect, and mood marking, remained essentially Iranian, as did the system of noun phrases and the use of prepositions and postpositions. The core vocabulary of Persian, including words for basic concepts such as family relationships, natural phenomena, and common actions, remained primarily Iranian, drawing on the lexical resources that had been part of the language for centuries. This continuity of grammatical structure and core vocabulary ensured that New Persian remained recognizably the same language as Middle Persian, despite the significant changes that had occurred in the vocabulary and writing system. The resilience of the grammatical structure of Persian demonstrates the capacity of languages to maintain their essential identity through periods of intense contact with other languages. The incorporation of Arabic vocabulary into Persian, while extensive, did not transform Persian into a variety of Arabic, just as the incorporation of Latin vocabulary into English did not transform English into a variety of Latin. The Arabic loanwords in Persian were absorbed into an existing linguistic framework that remained fundamentally Iranian, and these loanwords were subject to the grammatical rules and phonological patterns of Persian. Arabic nouns were used with Persian prepositions and Persian plural markers, and Arabic verbs were incorporated into Persian verbal constructions according to Persian grammatical patterns. The result was a language that combined an Iranian grammatical foundation with a lexicon enriched by Arabic borrowings, creating a medium of expression that was both Persian and Islamic. This combination of Iranian grammar and Arabic vocabulary was characteristic of New Persian and distinguished it from both Middle Persian, which had relatively little Arabic influence, and Arabic, which was a Semitic language with a completely different grammatical structure. The ability of Persian to absorb Arabic vocabulary while maintaining its grammatical identity demonstrates the flexibility and resilience of the language. The transformation of the Persian writing system from Pahlavi to the Arabic alphabet represented a significant change, but it was a change that served the interests of the Persian language and its speakers. The Pahlavi script, with its many difficulties and ambiguities, was ill-suited to the needs of a language that was seeking to establish itself as a literary medium in the Islamic world. The Arabic alphabet, despite requiring modification to represent Persian sounds, offered significant advantages, including wider accessibility, greater ease of writing, and association with the prestige of the Islamic religion and the Islamic State. The adoption of the Arabic alphabet allowed Persian to participate in the broader cultural life of the Islamic world, as Persian texts could be read by anyone who was literate in Arabic and as Persian writers could draw on the rich resources of Arabic literature and scholarship. The addition of 4 new letters to the Arabic alphabet for Persian sounds ensured that the distinctive phonological character of Persian would be preserved in writing, maintaining the identity of the language even as it adopted a new script. The transformation of the Persian writing system thus represented a pragmatic adaptation that served the long-term interests of the language. The resilience of the Persian language through the Islamic period was not a matter of simple resistance to change but rather a process of adaptive transformation, in which the language changed in order to survive and flourish in new circumstances. The Persians who maintained their language through the centuries of Arabic dominance did not do so by isolating themselves from the Islamic world or by refusing to engage with Arabic culture. Instead, they engaged deeply with Arabic language and literature, absorbing vocabulary and literary forms while maintaining the essential identity of their own language. The Persian language that emerged from this process was richer and more expressive than it would have been without the contact with Arabic, as the incorporation of Arabic vocabulary expanded the lexical resources of the language and enabled it to serve as a medium for the full range of Islamic religious, philosophical, and scientific expression. The transformation of Persian was thus not a defeat, but a triumph, as the language adapted to new circumstances and emerged from the period of transition stronger and more capable than before. The story of Persian's transformation demonstrates the capacity of languages to change and adapt while maintaining their essential identity. The comparison between Persian and other languages that have experienced similar processes of contact and transformation provides a useful perspective on the resilience of Persian. The incorporation of Latin vocabulary into European languages such as English, French, and Spanish, which occurred through the influence of the Christian Church and the legacy of the Roman Empire, provides a parallel to the incorporation of Arabic vocabulary into Persian. In both cases, a prestige language associated with religion and high culture contributed vocabulary to other languages without transforming their essential grammatical structure. The result in both cases was a linguistic enrichment that expanded the expressive capacity of the receiving languages while maintaining their identity. The parallel between Persian and Arabic on one hand and European languages and Latin on the other demonstrates that the processes of linguistic contact and transformation that Persian experienced were not unique but part of broader patterns of cultural exchange and adaptation that have characterized human history. The resilience of Persian through the Islamic period, like the resilience of European languages through the period of Latin dominance, demonstrates the capacity of languages to survive and flourish through periods of profound change. The story of how the Persian language survived the Arab conquest and went on to become one of the great literary languages of world history is a testament to the resilience of cultural identity and the capacity of languages to adapt to changed circumstances while maintaining their essential character. The fall of the Sasanian Empire in the 7th century brought an end to Persian political power and seemed to threaten the survival of Persian language and culture. The Pahlavi script, which had been the primary written form of Persian during the Sasanian period, declined rapidly after the conquest, as the new Islamic state conducted its administration in Arabic and had no need for the old Persian writing system. The Arabic language, as the language of the Quran and of Islamic civilization, possessed enormous prestige and authority, and it seemed possible that the Persian language would gradually be replaced by Arabic, as conquered peoples adopted the language of their conquerors. Yet this did not happen. Instead, the Persian language survived and flourished, transforming itself from the Middle Persian of the Sasanian period into the New Persian of the Islamic period, written in a modified version of the Arabic alphabet, and enriched by thousands of Arabic loanwords. The survival of Persian was made possible by a combination of factors, including the demographic weight of the Persian-speaking population, the practical necessity of communicating with the masses in their own language, and the cultural pride that Persians took in their linguistic heritage. The Arab conquerors were a small minority in Iran, vastly outnumbered by the Persian population, and they could not govern effectively without communicating with their subjects in some form of Persian. Even as Arabic became the language of official records and religious texts, Persian remained the language of the marketplace, the home, and the community, where the vast majority of social interaction took place. The Persian language was also deeply intertwined with Iranian cultural identity, carrying within it the memory of the pre-Islamic past and the values and traditions that had shaped Iranian civilization for centuries. This cultural dimension of language made Persian a powerful symbol of Iranian identity, one that could not simply be abandoned in favor of Arabic without losing something essential about what it meant to be Persian. The transformation of Persian from a purely spoken language into a literary language written in Arabic script was a gradual process that took place over several centuries, with the eastern region of Khorasan playing a crucial role as a linguistic laboratory where the new literary language took shape. The Persian spoken in Khorasan and Transoxiana, which was characterized by extraordinary linguistic diversity and intense language contact, developed into a flexible and expressive medium that could serve the needs of poetry, prose, administration, and scholarship. The rise of Persian dynasties in the Eastern Islamic world, particularly the Samanid dynasty, provided the political and cultural support necessary for the flowering of Persian literature, as these dynasties patronized Persian poets and promoted Persian as a language of administration and court culture. The literature that emerged from this environment, including the Shahnameh Ferdowsi, established Persian as a literary language of the highest quality, capable of rivaling Arabic in expressive power and artistic achievement. The success of this literary tradition demonstrated that it was possible to be both Muslim and Persian, and this demonstration would have profound implications for the future development of Islamic civilization. The relationship between Persian and Arabic in the Islamic world was characterized by a complex interplay of competition and cooperation, as each language possessed distinct domains of prestige and authority while also enriching the other through contact and exchange. Arabic remained the primary language of religion and scholarship throughout the Islamic world, as the Quran was revealed in Arabic and the intellectual traditions of Islamic civilization had been developed primarily in Arabic. Persian, on the other hand, became the primary language of poetry, court culture, and literary expression in the Eastern Islamic world, as Persian poets developed a rich tradition of poetic expression that was admired and imitated throughout the Islamic world. This division of linguistic labor created a bilingual intellectual culture in which scholars and writers moved between languages depending on the audience and the subject matter. The mutual influence between Persian and Arabic enriched both languages and the civilization they served, as Persian absorbed Arabic vocabulary in the domains of religion, law, philosophy, and science, while Arabic absorbed Persian vocabulary in the domains of administration, court culture, and daily life. The expansion of Persian beyond the borders of Iran represents one of the most remarkable developments in the history of the language, as Persian became a language of international culture and administration across a vast region stretching from Anatolia to India. The prestige of Persian literature and the association of Persian with court culture and literary excellence gave the language a cultural authority that extended far beyond the borders of the Persian-speaking world. Persian became the language of court culture and high literature for rulers and elites throughout the Eastern Islamic world, regardless of their ethnic origins or native languages. The adoption of Persian by non-Persian dynasties, including Turkish, Mongol, and Indian rulers, demonstrated the prestige and influence of Persianate civilization and contributed to the spread of Persian language and literature to new regions and new peoples. The influence of Persian on other languages, particularly Urdu, which emerged as a synthesis of Persian and local Indian languages, demonstrates the depth of Persianate cultural penetration in the subcontinent and the lasting impact of Persian literary traditions on the languages and cultures of the region. The story of Persian's survival and transformation is ultimately a story of resilience, adaptation, and creative synthesis. The Persians lost their empire, their dynasty, and their state religion, but they did not lose their language, which adapted to new circumstances and found new forms of expression within the Islamic world. The transformation of Persian from Pahlavi to New Persian, with the adoption of the Arabic alphabet and the incorporation of Arabic vocabulary, was not a defeat but a triumph, as the language emerged from the period of transition stronger and more capable than before. The Persian language became a vehicle for preserving Iranian cultural identity while also serving as a medium for expressing the full range of Islamic religious, philosophical, and scientific thought. The voice of Persia, which had been silenced by the fall of the Sasanian Empire, was heard again in the poetry of Ferdowsi, the philosophy of Avicenna, the mysticism of Rumi, and the countless works of literature, history, and scholarship that were composed in Persian over the centuries. The Persian language, which had once been spoken in the Sasanian court of Ctesiphon, became a world language, carrying Iranian culture and Islamic civilization to new regions and new peoples. This remarkable story demonstrates that the loss of political power does not mean the loss of cultural voice, and that a language can change its alphabet, absorb foreign vocabulary, and adapt to new religious and political circumstances while still maintaining its essential identity. The Persian language survived the Arab conquest and went on to conquer the Islamic world, proving that the voice of a civilization can endure through centuries of change and continue to speak to future generations. I hope you enjoyed this content, and I'll see you in the next video.